If you ever meet somebody that tells you they weren't scared one bit, you can tell them they're a liar. I was scared every time I went up.
Legendary, indomitable, iconic. The B-17 bomber was a formidable sight in the skies during World War II, with its gleaming silver body, massive wings, and 13 machine guns. It looked like an unbreakable fortress. But for the crews inside, it was a fortress of fear. Imagine enduring bone-chilling temperatures at 18,000 feet, with frost forming on your skin even inside the aircraft. The deafening roar of the engines is your constant companion, while the thin, frigid air makes every breath a struggle. Enemy fighters swarm around you, relentless in their pursuit. As bullets tear through the fuselage, each one a potential death sentence. But here's what most people don't know. The B-17 wasn't the impenetrable shield it appeared to be. Crews faced almost impossible odds, with nearly half of all missions ending in tragedy. So, how did they keep going? How did they fight exhaustion, frostbite, and the constant threat of death on every mission? How did they face that haunting question with each takeoff? Will I make it back this time? Today, we're diving into the terrifying experiences of B-17 crews, exploring the courage, grit, and survival instincts that kept them going. Stay tuned. These stories will change the way you see this iconic bomber. The life inside the flying fortress. The B-17 bomber first took to the skies in 1938 and quickly became a game-changer in World War II. It brought hope and excitement, as it was faster, tougher, and could carry more bombs than any other plane at the time. The B-17 gave America an edge in the air, and its crews felt proud to fly one of the strongest machines of the war. It carried a crew of 10 men, each with a critical role to play. Pilots navigated the dangerous skies, bombardiers aimed for pinpoint accuracy, and gunners stood ready to defend against swarms of German fighter planes. Every man on board was essential, from the radio operator keeping communications alive to the engineer ensuring the engines ran smoothly, all working together to survive each deadly mission. Every mission felt like a one-way trip. What seemed like a powerful machine from the outside was a completely different story inside. Imagine flying for hours at an altitude where temperatures could drop to 60 degrees. The B-17 had no pressurization, so the crew had to wear oxygen masks just to breathe in the thin, freezing air. If those masks failed, it meant a fast and terrifying death, either from lack of oxygen or freezing to death. Crew members constantly rubbed their hands to keep feeling in their fingers, while frost formed on their goggles and the metal around them. To combat the cold, crews wore electrically heated flight suits, but these suits were notorious for malfunctioning. When they failed, frostbite became a serious danger. If anyone touched the metal of the plane without gloves, their skin would stick and peel off, and further damage prevented the safety of the passengers and the flight attendants' children. For the gunners, the conditions were harsh. Positioned in open turrets or tight spaces, they faced freezing cold and constant enemy fire. The wind howled around them, biting at their faces, and the plane's vibrations made it hard to focus. Yet, they had to stay sharp, always on the lookout for German fighters, like the feared Messerschmitt Bf-109. Their fingers, numb from the cold, gripped the icy triggers of their guns as they scanned the skies. Clearing a jammed gun was a race against time. Without gloves, touching the metal could freeze skin instantly, and many gunners lost fingers trying to fix their weapons. Every moment demanded full attention, because missing even one enemy fighter could be fatal. At the very front of the plane, the bombardier had a critical and dangerous job. Kneeling behind the glass nose, they had a clear view of the ground below and the enemy fire coming their way. Their role was to aim and release bombs with pinpoint accuracy, making sure they hit the target. precision was everything. One wrong move could waste the mission, or, even worse, put the entire crew in danger. But the Bombardier's challenges didn't end there. Inside the B-17, conditions were harsh. The glass nose offered little protection from the bitter cold, and the Bombardier often worked in freezing temperatures, with icy winds cutting through the thin metal of the plane.
My job as a bombardier is to take the cotter pin out of the bomb so the vane can spin loose in the air and the detonator is free then to hit the bomb. And I do that generally when we're over the channel before we got to 10,000 feet where we'd go on oxygen. Well, the temperature was anywhere from 25 to 40 below zero. But no, it was horrible atmosphere. We weren't pressurized. So it was just bad. Now we got to England and we were assigned to the 452nd Bomb Group. They had lost 14 out of 24 planes on the 12th of May over Brooks, Czechoslovakia.
As the first in line for enemy attacks, they were constantly exposed to flak and machine gun fire. The bomber had no pressurization or heating, so frost would form on their goggles, and numb fingers made the delicate work of setting bomb sites even harder. Despite these conditions, the Bombardier had to stay focused and calm, knowing that their accuracy was vital to both the mission's success and the crew's survival. For the pilot and co-pilot, controlling the B-17 was a constant battle. The plane was large and heavy, and maneuvering it through the sky was no easy task. In rough weather or under enemy fire, keeping the aircraft steady required immense strength and focus. The controls were stiff, and fighting the plane's weight in turbulent skies was physically draining, especially on long missions. On top of that, they had to manage the coordination of the entire crew. Every decision was critical. One wrong move could throw the entire mission off course or put the crew in danger. In the middle of the plane, the radio operator had a crucial job, keeping communication open with the base and other planes.
The radio operator room is right behind the bomb bay. And of course I was trained, I had a desk, a swivel chair, I had a receiver in front of me, the transmitter behind me. Morse code was the only way to communicate. The target's there, the sky is full of exploding shells, and you have to fly into it. So that's when you learn how to pray.
As the first in line for enemy attacks, they were constantly exposed to flak and machine gun fire. The bomber had no pressurization or heating, so frost would form on their goggles, and numb fingers made the delicate work of setting bomb sites even harder. Despite these conditions, the Bombardier had to stay focused and calm, knowing that their accuracy was vital to both the mission's success and the crew's survival. For the pilot and co-pilot, controlling the B-17 was a constant battle. The plane was large and heavy, and maneuvering it through the sky was no easy task. In rough weather or under enemy fire, keeping the aircraft steady required immense strength and focus. The controls were stiff, and fighting the plane's weight in turbulent skies was physically draining, especially on long missions. On top of that, they had to manage the coordination of the entire crew. Every decision was critical. One wrong move could throw the entire mission off course or put the crew in danger. In the middle of the plane, the radio operator had a crucial job, keeping communication open with the base and other planes.
On a runway, planes lined up. And when the red flare was shot up from the main building, we would take off. But we'd take off every 30 to 45 seconds. One was not even airborne hardly, and the next one followed. The toughest part was the forming, because you've got to remember, one plane's up, now there's two, now there's three, and we had to get in formation, and the weather in England is terrible.
However, this formation required intense concentration and coordination from the pilots. The planes had to stay perfectly aligned, often just a few hundred feet apart. while navigating through rough weather, enemy fire, and turbulent skies. The slightest mistake could lead to a mid-air collision, endangering not only their own plane, but the entire formation.
And there were many mid-air collisions. We missed a plane by about 100 feet one day.
It was mentally and physically exhausting for the crew, especially the pilots and gunners, who had to remain constantly alert, tracking enemy fighters while ensuring they didn't drift out of formation. Flying in such close quarters added an extra layer of danger to an already perilous mission, where any misstep could prove deadly. One of the most hidden and deadly dangers of flying at high altitudes was hypoxia, the lack of oxygen. If a crew member's oxygen mask failed, they would quietly pass out, drifting into what seemed like a peaceful sleep. Without quick help, that sleep would turn into death. There were no dramatic signs, no shouting, no struggling, just silence. And in the constant roar of the B-17's engines, it was almost impossible for others to notice what was happening until it was too late. The constant threat of German fighters and flak.
Flak destroyed, shot down more B-17s than German fighters did. And the bad thing was you could not shoot back at flak. You had to take it.
July 31st, 1944, we were 27,000 feet over Munich. And about 10 seconds after I dropped the bombs, a burst of flak hit right under us, knocked out 2 engines, one on each side.
Of course, the enemy wasn't just the cold or the lack of oxygen. The true terror came when the B-17 entered enemy airspace. German anti-aircraft guns, flak, were one of the greatest threats. The German 88 mm flak cannon could fire shells to incredible altitudes, designed to explode and send deadly shrapnel tearing through the skies. Even near misses were enough to cripple a B-17, shredding its fuselage or tearing holes in its wings.
By that time, the Germans got pretty accurate. They had the German 88 millimeter cannon that could fire 5 miles up. What they did is hit our number 1 and 2 engine. A B-17 is not made to stay up on 2 engines.
Each time a B-17 approached its target, the flak would thicken, turning the sky into a deadly minefield. Crews described the terrifying feeling of watching flak clouds burst around them, waiting to see if the next one would rip their plane apart. And as if that wasn't enough, there was always the fear of being hit directly. A single flak hit could detonate the bombs on board, leading to an instant, fiery death for everyone inside. While the flak was bad enough, the B-17 crews also had to contend with the relentless assaults of German fighters. Messerschmitt's Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 1090s were the scourge of Allied bombers. These planes, designed for speed and navigation ability, would attack in coordinated waves, targeting the most vulnerable parts of the B-17, its engines, cockpit, and rear. Though the B-17 was armed with 13 machine guns, the German fighters exploited its blind spots. They would dive from above or attack head-on, knowing that even the B-17's formidable firepower had its limits. Early in the war, the bomber crews were often left without fighter escorts for much of their journey. The German fighters would swoop in, attacking the formation with deadly precision. For many crews, being attacked by fighters was even more terrifying than facing flak. A direct hit to the engines or cockpit was often fatal, and even if the plane was still flyable, the gunners were vulnerable to the strafing runs of the enemy. Watching your fellow bombers fall from the sky, engulfed in flames, was a sight no crew member could ever forget. The psychological toll of endless fear. While the physical dangers were more than enough to terrify any crew, the psychological toll of flying mission after mission was immense. Each time the B-17 took off, the crew knew there was a high possibility they wouldn't come back. The pressure built up over time, with many men suffering from what we now recognize as PTSD. Back then, It was called combat fatigue, and it was all too common among bomber crews. Surviving a mission wasn't always about skill. Many veterans will tell you that luck played a huge role in their survival. Planes would come back from missions missing entire chunks of their fuselage, with only 2 functioning engines, or with their wings barely holding together. Some B-17s returned with injured crew members frozen in their seats, unable to move due to the cold and their injuries. For the lucky ones who did make it back, there was often a sense of disbelief. How could a plane so heavily damaged still be flying? And yet, time after time, these flying fortresses lived up to their name, limping back to base in conditions that should have been fatal. But not all missions ended with a safe return. Many B-17s never made it back. When the damage was too great or the fuel ran out, the crew faced a grim decision. Stay with the plane and try to crash land, or bail out into enemy territory. For those who parachuted over enemy lines, capture was almost certain. And for some, even bailing out wasn't an option. Planes that took a direct hit could explode in mid-air, leaving no chance for escape. These were the men who paid the ultimate price, those who flew into battle, knowing full well that their chances of survival were slim, but who went anyway. Their sacrifice remains a testament to the courage of the B-17 crews, who faced unimaginable terror with each mission. Legacy of the B-17 crews. Today, the legacy of the B-17 crews lives on. Their bravery helped turn the tide of the war, but the price was high. Thousands of airmen never returned from their missions, and those who did were forever changed. For many veterans, the memories of those missions are still vivid, even decades later. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, B-17 flying fortresses played a crucial role in the invasion of Normandy, bombing German defenses to support Allied forces on the ground. While the battle raged below, the B-17 crews faced deadly challenges in the sky. Despite these dangers, they pressed on, fully aware that their mission was essential to the success of D-Day, an operation that brought the war significantly closer to its end. Leon Waldman, a B-17 gunner who was grounded during the D-Day mission, recounted the success of the B-17s.
My co-pilot, I didn't like the co-pilot. I was stupid, and I told him, don't go near the bomb bay on the next mission. So he reported me, and I guess it went up to the squadron commander. So instead of court-martialing me, he took me off that mission. That was my punishment. It turned out to be June 2nd to June 11th, 9 days. Well, what does June 2nd to June 11th tell you? It was D-Day.
He shared how the flying fortresses played a crucial role in supporting the invasion, bombing key German positions and weakening their defenses. They flew this mission to Romania, bombed it, then went on to Russia. Then they sat down for a day or two. Then they flew another mission. But that took the pressure off of the Western Front, somewhat. The B-17 flying fortress may have been a marvel of engineering, but it was the courage of the men who flew it that made it legendary. These airmen faced unimaginable horrors, and yet they kept flying, mission after mission, in the hope that each flight might bring them one step closer to victory.